I've played World of Warcraft for years, pushed some of the hardest dungeon content in the game, and had some of the best gaming experiences ever inside of Azeroth. But there's one thing that I hear constantly from new, returning, or aspiring players. WoW looks amazing, but it is far too confusing to actually get into. So I decided to go undercover. I made a fresh character, picked a class that I've never played before, concealed my identity, and tried to experience the game from scratch. This is the start of a full beginner journey, going incognito from character creation all the way to the end game portions of World of Warcraft. Along the way, I'm going to break down every single step so that new and returning players have a clear blueprint of how to actually begin World of Warcraft without feeling completely lost. And for my long-term players, let's just say starting WoW from scratch proved to be very challenging in ways that I never really expected. Before we fully kick things off, I want to set the stage for what this series actually is. The goal here isn't to make another one of those hour-and-a-half long beginner guides where someone reads through every single menu and system and ability in a way that slowly drains the life force out of your body. There's plenty of those already. Instead, I want to make this a bit of an edutainment style beginner roadmap. For the new and returning viewers, this series is designed to be a realistic on-ramp into World of Warcraft. I won't be explaining every system in exhaustive detail, but I'll be breaking down the important steps and the general direction I'd recommend if you were to start World of Warcraft and eventually move into endgame content. For my veteran viewers, I think this will be interesting for a completely different reason. We often forget how hard it is to actually get into World of Warcraft as a new player. It all feels pretty obvious to us, but it is definitely not obvious to people coming from the outside. And honestly, this whole journey did get kind of weird at times. I went undercover in a guild raid team using a voice mod. I inserted myself into capital city conversations with people that I knew from Mythic Plus pushing, tried very hard to act like a normal player, despite my sweaty goblin brain sort of taking over at times. It turns out being incognito is actually kind of fun. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. All of the footage for this series has already been recorded, so showing the character now won't ruin the entire premise. But during the actual recording, I took the undercover part pretty seriously. My BattleNet activity was always on hidden. The character I played wasn't linked to my Raider.io profile, and I avoided using any titles or mounts or just anything that might give away that I am an experienced player already. For newer players, this might not make a lot of sense, but the simple version is I did everything that I reasonably could to make sure that nobody knew that this was a character that was being played by an experienced player, let alone by myself. A few people did know, but that was necessary for reasons that I'll explain later on. For now, the important thing is that I was on a fresh incognito character trying to experience World of Warcraft as close to a new player as I realistically could. So, to kick things off, what was I actually trying to achieve? I wanted to take this character into proper endgame PvE content without using my reputation or my friends list or any achievements or any existing experience to skip the process. Goal 1 was to join a heroic raid team, blend in like a normal new or returning player, and eventually work towards ahead of the curve, which is pretty much like the peak of mid-core raiding before you start to get into properly sweaty, nerdy raiding. Goal 2 was to reach 3000 Mythic Plus score entirely through pugging, no main account linked, no recognizable name, none of the usual credentials that I would often rely on to make it easier to get into groups. Basically acting as a humble little beginner trying to get into keys, and not a sweaty Mythic Plus nerd LARPing as a noob. For now, this series was focused on PvE, so PvP is not part of it. However, if there is enough demand, I could also add an extra episode at the end, doing something like getting to 1800 arena rating while undercover. Just let me know in the comments if this would be interesting. But without further ado, let's get into where every single World of Warcraft journey begins: character creation. For newcomers, WoW operates on a trinity system. We have tanks, who hold the attention of mobs and survive big hits, healers, who keep everyone alive, and DPS, who are there to do damage and hopefully not stand in every mechanic. Some classes can fill multiple roles. A druid, for example, can tank, heal, melee DPS, or range DPS, Meanwhile, something like a mage is purely there to do damage. The actual importance of your class and race choice is much lower than it used to be. These days, you can play cross-faction, cross-server, and racial abilities have such a small impact on your performance that unless you're doing the absolute highest level content, it doesn't really matter all that much. So for most players, especially beginners, my advice is pretty simple. Read through the descriptions of each class, look at the different characters, and then pick a class and race combo that you vibe with. For me, I wanted to play something that I had no experience on, mainly to make the learning process a little bit more authentic. In my case, Mage, Rogue, and Warrior were the 3 options that this got narrowed down to. And since the entire series was an undercover mission, picking the stealth-based assassin sort of felt like a bit of a no-brainer. So, Rogue it was. For the character name, my first idea was Incognito, which I thought was very clever. I ran this past my friend Zan, who knew about the series because of the raiding portion of the challenge. I'll explain this later on. Her read, though, was that the name was probably too obvious. Pretty much all of my characters are some variation of Bog or Boggy. So if I showed up on a rogue called Incognito, I might as well have just called it Definitely Not Bog. And then Zan came up with an absolute cracker. For context, the name Bog originally came from my wife about 10 years ago after she recognized my uncanny ability to clog toilets with extremely large poops. I would bog the toilet. And here's where Zan's genius comes in. What's another word for poop? Stool. What happens when you blend stool and stealth together? You get Stoolth. My rogue's name is a poo joke, which I kind of like. When first firing the game up, you'll be given the choice between Exile's Reach and your race's original starting zone. For new players, I highly recommend Exile's Reach. This is Blizzard's curated beginner experience. It'll walk you through a lot of the basics. As an experienced player, I usually skip it, but as someone just starting WoW for the first time, it is genuinely very good. Also, if you note that parts of my UI look a bit different to yours, don't panic. That's because I use a few external add-ons, which are basically community-made third-party tools that change or improve parts of the user interface. They are not required to start playing the game, and I'll start explaining the more important ones gradually when they become relevant throughout the journey. For Stoolth, I'm not going to cover every second of leveling in detail, partly because I think this takes away from the experience of discovering the world for yourself, and partly because veteran players have already done this so many times that watching me collect 8 bare asses is probably not the best use of their time. But for new players, I genuinely recommend taking your time here. Leveling is a chance to explore the world and learn your class and try different abilities, queue into some dungeons, even make a few different characters if you're not sure what you actually enjoy yet. Nothing you do at this point is going to ruin your account long term, so don't stress too much about trying to be too optimal. Just play, experiment, and get comfortable with the game. That said, there is one thing I would set up early, some basic action bars and keybinds. By default, World of Warcraft will start you with one main action bar, but you'll quickly level and obtain more abilities than you've got space for. So I'd recommend going into your settings, searching for action bars, and turning on at least action bar 2 and action bar 3. Then by pressing escape and going to edit mode, you can move them into a simple stack at the bottom of your screen. From there, go into your keybind settings and set up a few easy buttons in advance. For most players, keys 1 through 6 are normally pretty comfortable to press, and then adding shift and control modifiers gives you more space with these same buttons without needing to stretch your hand across the whole keyboard like a pianist. So you might have 1 through 6 on your main bar, and then shift 1 through 6 on your second bar, and then control 1 through 6 on your third bar, and then a few easy to reach letters like R, Shift R, and Control R. You don't need to memorize these immediately, and you probably won't even end up using all of them. At this point, all we want to do is just give you a spot for you to put new abilities as you unlock them with keybinds that are set up and ready to go. Once that's done, honestly, you can just get out into the world. Following the campaign actually turned out to be a really good thing to do. Blizzard now shuffles you towards the Dragonflight portion of the campaign, and it is really well streamlined. You can read the quests if you're interested in the story. You can queue into dungeons with 4 other random people. Basically just use the leveling process as a low pressure space to learn how your character actually works. One thing to note as you level is the talent tree. This can look insanely daunting to start with, but in reality, there isn't really a lot to it. You will unlock points as you level, and the choices are never set in stone. If you don't want to think too much about this, you can go to Google and search something like Subtlety Rogue Talents Wowhead. I'll outline more advanced stuff when the time comes, but Stoolth pretty much just plopped random talent points in wherever I wanted, and then copied a Wowhead one at max level. Once you reach the level range of the current expansion, the game will start pushing you into the latest storyline. You'll get a breadcrumb quest that'll pop up and send you there once you hit the level, and this is where the game will start to open up a little bit more. The main thing I would recommend here is pretty simple. Follow the campaign quests through to the end. The reason for this is the campaign will unlock other systems, zones, and pieces of content once you hit max level. It will also give you some story context behind what's going on in the world at that given time. Leveling from here is mostly the same, but this feels like a good time to introduce professions. As part of Stoolth's journey LARPing as a noob, I also decided not to send myself any gold from my other characters. So much like in real life, I'm poor. And one of the easiest ways to fix this is through professions. Professions are basically skills that your character can learn. Broadly speaking, they fall into 2 categories, either gathering or production. Gathering professions let you collect resources out in the world, while production professions lets you turn those resources into crafted items. You can speak to a city guard for directions to any of the trainers for these professions. Every character can have 2 primary professions at any given point in time. For new players, I'd normally recommend starting with gathering. I went with herbalism and mining, which let me collect herbs and ores while I leveled and then sell them on the auction house to other players. Skinning can also work. This lets you skin beasts that you've killed while out in the world. Production professions are a lot of fun, but they usually require a little bit more knowledge and some starting gold. So if you're brand new to the game and just want a simple way to make a little bit of money, gathering is by far the easiest place to start. Professions do have their own talent trees, but I wouldn't stress too much about them early on. You can mostly just put points in the spots that sound useful, like gathering more materials or improving the quality of materials you collect, that sort of thing. We will touch on professions fairly repeatedly throughout the series because they do become quite relevant as you progress into endgame content. But for now, the beginner version is pretty simple. Pick up a few gathering professions, collect things while you level, and then sell it on when you get the chance. At this point in leveling, you can also start doing delves. These are solo-friendly instance pieces of content that are marked on your minimap by this little door icon. You go into this with an NPC companion named Valera, complete objectives, kill enemies, collect the loot at the end, and gradually level up Valera as you go along. I'll talk more about this later as well because they're going to become relevant to gearing your character. But while you're leveling, you can just sort of get in there and get familiar with how they work because some of the quests and experience you get is actually good just purely for leveling. For Stoolth, I basically did this all in one afternoon. I was sick on that day and at this point was getting very invested in the Stoolth journey. So naturally, I used my sick day in the most responsible way possible by leveling a poo joke rogue in World of Warcraft. And now that we got to max level, we can start getting this character into some more respectable gear. But before that, if you hit max level, your character probably looks a lot like Stoolth. Like they just went on a manic shopping spree in a thrift store and just equipped whatever was the most expensive thing there. So let's fix the most important thing first, the outfit. In major cities, you can speak to a guard and ask for the location of a transmogrifier. This NPC lets you change the appearance of your armor to anything that you've previously collected. This is basically WoW's cosmetic endgame. For Stoolth, I wanted something subtle but still with that rogue vibe, so this Indiana Jones temple diving style seemed to fit really well. Honestly, I was actually kind of proud of this one. Stoolth is looking very slick now. Time to start getting some actual gear. Before we jump into endgame group content, I'd recommend getting some basic gear from solo content first. The first easy option is the auction house. If we head over there, you can search for your armor and weapon type and look for cheap upgrades. I wouldn't break the bank here, but there's usually quite a few affordable pieces for very, very cheap that are a good starting point to fill out some poor slots of gear on your character. From there, we'll head out into the open world. On our map, we can see world quests, some of which will reward blue quality gear. While exploring, you'll also run into rare mobs, usually marked by a star on the minimap. These can also drop similar blue quality gear. Each of the major factions has a weekly quest, usually marked by blue exclamation marks in their respective zones. These are really worth doing because they'll reward some solid gear, and as you build up your renown level with each of these factions, you can also unlock some epic quality gear. But the two main solo gearing methods I'd focus on after this very rudimentary stuff is Delves and Prey. We touched on Delves while leveling, but at max level, they become much more important. Some Delves each day will have this glowing effect on the map. This means they're bountiful, and they'll offer a one-time reward of epic quality gear. My recommendation is to wait until you can at least do tier 8 Delves before completing the bountiful versions. You don't want to burn the bountiful delve charge on lower levels than a level 8 because otherwise you're sort of just wasting it. I did quite a few of these whenever they were available and they ended up giving me quite a few good upgrades. The second major gearing solo method is Prey. This is an open world system that's only just been introduced, where what you do is fill a progress bar towards hunting a target when you're in a specific zone. Once you track that target down, you fight a boss and then you get loot or upgrade tokens at the end. These are all started from one specific building within the capital city, which the game will direct you towards throughout, but it is located here for those who might have missed it. Honestly, I actually really like this system. It gets you out into the world. It gives you a chance to sort of actively chase something while you're just doing other things. I think it's also just very worth doing. You can get a couple of epic pieces per week from this, and generally speaking, you would just want to complete it on the highest difficulty that you have available. To cap off our early gearing, we need to quickly touch on one of the more intimidating aspects, crafting. As you complete things like delves and weekly quests and other endgame activities, you'll start to get these spark items. These are basically used to craft high-level pieces of endgame gear. Now, crafting can look extremely confusing at first, so we're not going to get deep into the weeds to start with, but here is the beginner introduction. Sparks let you make these very strong pieces of gear, and those can then be upgraded later on with certain upgrade tokens. When choosing what to craft, I would avoid the head, shoulders, chest, legs, and trinket slots for now. I'll explain why in the future episodes, but for the time being, just pick your lowest item level piece that isn't in one of those slots. You want to then head over to the crafting order station and search for the item that matches that slot for your class's armor type. Once you've found it, click track recipe, then head over to the auction house. You can also buy a missive. This lets you choose a secondary stat on the item. If you'd checked Wowhead earlier, you might have noticed that some secondary stats are generally better for your class than others. For Stoolth, who is playing a subtlety rogue, stats like crit, haste, and mastery are all pretty good, so I grabbed a missive that would match these. We then head back to the crafting order station, find the item again, add the sparks at the top, add the missives at the bottom, and now we need to find someone to actually craft it. What we can do is open up trade chat, type LFC, which means looking for craft, and then shift click the item that you want to have crafted to link it into the chat. Once you press enter, you will get probably 13 to 40 players whisper you within 0.5 of a second. You want to pick the one that looks like the least annoying bot, and then select personal order, enter the character name, add the materials. You can add a tip if you want. It doesn't have to be that large, and then send it over. One important thing to note with these, do not delete crafted pieces. These can be upgraded very, very high later on, and you may hit points where they temporarily fall behind, but they may still be useful again down the track. The thing is, once you've used those sparks, You can't get them again, and they're a limited resource. For now though, the crafting is just going to give us a few stronger item level boosts, which is going to put Stoolth in a much better position for stepping into proper group content. This feels like a good endpoint for episode 1 of the WoW Undercover series. Next episode, I think we'll be diving headfirst into Mythic Plus. As I said earlier, my original goal was to reach 3,000 rating entirely through pugging, but I may have actually gone quite a bit past that. What can I say? I kinda love Mythic Plus. But holy crap, trying to experience Mythic Plus from the perspective of a new player was an absolute journey. The invites, the rejections, the group finder experience, and just like so many weird social interactions. There's a lot to cover. If the next episode is available by the time that you're watching this, I'll link it on screen now. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait. Many thanks to my channel supporters, The Joy of Checks, Tobias, and Yalem at the Keystone Legend tier, as well as everyone else who supports the channel. Have a great week, gamers. I'll see you for the next step of Stoolth's journey through Azeroth. Until next time, take care.